Welcome to the October session of CCR. This morning we were in the Northeast and we flew back today. So this was from this past week. The colors are not great yet, but probably this week they'll be wonderful in Vermont and New Hampshire. Just a reminder, October 12th, midnight, is the end of the year deadline for submission of your digital prints or real prints too. Christopher Mortimer, new member. Guest, Rob Westerman, Earl Charles, and Ro Cole. Welcome. And I hope that you'll find things interesting enough to go ahead and join the group. Not a big expense, but surely you'll get something out of the presentations. Upcoming meetings, Venkat and I are doing travel photography next month on November 12th. The end of the year banquet is December 10th with cocktails at 6 and dinner at 7 at the Jebsen Center at the University of Richmond. For those of you who have not been, it's a very nice event. Wives and guests are encouraged. It's a nice meal and a place that you'll see the entirety of 400 and some odd usually photographs that are presented with their awards. We've finalized the Jane Webb's position, and welcome, Jane. We have other things that are, other positions that are open, so if you have any inclination, step forward. We'd love to see you participate. Leo has put up spotlights and other things on the YouTube channel. So there are other mediums that you can use to look at what's happening in the group. I've had this slide before where Dan is retired as exhibit director. Patricia and others have really stepped up, and they've done a great job, but we need continuing help with that. Patricia, thank you very much. Nice to see you. And congrats to Karen for her second place. Yeah, absolutely. Applause. Thank you. He works tremendously hard with some input from Heidi and Kurt and others. And as a result, the second place in the PSA newsletter competition was awarded to this group. And that's really a fairly big deal. So she works hard, and it turns out that people have recognized that. These are our three judges coming for the end of the year competition. You can go use their websites and see what they have photographed, and it's an interesting thing to see their perspective. These are accomplished photographers with good credentials and a good eye, and we're very excited that we can look forward to their judging on November, whatever it is, 9th. I put this slide in, and it's just a reminder that submissions should be single images, and technically sky replacement is more than one image. So when you enter an image for competition, it should be one image, not a collaboration, unless you use the creative art category. And computer generated stuff, we don't have a good way to sort that out yet, but we're depending on you to be honest about your submission so that you didn't take a picture of a house, and then put AI images in there.
All right, this is Karen standing in for Pat, who had a work conflict tonight. These are just a couple of reminders that she wanted to pass along. End of year procedures were emailed out, but you can also find them on the website. Remember, we're switching to 10 images this year. You may substitute up to 5 wildcards, and wildcards would be images that did not go through an official evaluation at the club. So, and you can do any combination of that. So you can send in 9 images in one wildcard or 5 and 5, whatever works out for you. So if David Everett said, oh, Karen, that picture is really horrible, and I decided to throw that one out, I can substitute a wildcard in for that one. Just be really careful selecting your categories. And I encourage you, if you have a question, call a board member and we'll be happy to say, send me the image and I'll give you some feedback on whether it's a landscape or an architecture. So we will be happy to help you with those. Remember the sizing now that we have our new projector. We have different sizing. So the length, i.e. the width, 3840 pixels, and the height, 2160, and that's all in your procedures as well. I have to make a little sticky note for myself, and I stick it on my computer so I remember when I'm resizing stuff what to do. Make sure you use the exact title that you used when you submitted that evaluated image. If you change a word, if you add an S by mistake, the macros that Michael Orr and Jeff Claypool and Pat all put together, it'll kick it out. So we want to try and make Pat's life a little bit easier. So make sure you double check those titles and make sure it's the same title. However, if your evaluator for that month suggested you change the title, you can do it, only if the evaluators ask you to do it. But you need to let Pat know what the original title was and what the new title is going to be, so that she knows when it kicks out that that's okay. All righty, and Mr. Leo, next slide. There are a few more instructions. This is our naming convention. I thought we might as well just throw it up there so that we can take any questions if you have them. Notice that each portion of that title is separated by an underscore. So P_PO_CO. And all that means something. So it's either a print or a digital. The PO is what category. Is it a portrait? Is it a landscape? Is it whatever? Color or black and white. The next section is what group are you in? And if you have a question about your group, again, you can talk to Pat, you can talk to any one of the board members. New members are all invited to go into our novice group. And then the next level up would be advanced, the next level up would be expert. So we have 3 different groups. And then empty-handed there is a title for your image, and we like fun titles. And you may use hyphens within your titles. The WC is the wild card that I mentioned earlier versus evaluated. If it went through an evaluation, it's an EV. If it's a brand new image you're throwing at us, it's a WC for a wild card. And then finally, you put your name at the end, .jpg. Okay? All right. Questions? I knew there'd be questions. The assigned subject will be in place of the PO for portrait. So if you look at your procedures, it'll be AS _ what do we have? We had windows, we had panoramas, and we had, if they went through, that we know that they're evaluated, but you still probably ought to put the EV in there, otherwise it might kick it out. Yes, yeah. So just since you brought that up.
Other comment that year to year, the categories are not always the same. And certainly the assigned subjects are, I won't say never the same, but I screwed up this year and put the category from something of last year. And I blew it and was caught and corrected. So just be careful that you're using the category names from the current year.
Yes, they are. Yeah, the question is, we don't have an insect category, so all of your bugs and your butterflies, they would go in animals. Unless you wanted to go into pictorial, which is sort of our big catch-all category. But yeah, they're animals, they have locomotion. I believe that's the biological definition. Okay, and another question. Our question is new members in the novice category, and that's our suggestion. But, hey, if you've been published in National Geographic and you want to go straight into expert, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, new members, you're invited to come in as a novice, and then I won't go into all the details, but we have a progression category. So we assign points to you, credits to you. And once you accumulate a bunch of credits at one level, you'll get a polite little email from Pat that says, we think you need to move up to advanced. So we've got those thresholds and they're all defined in the procedures. You're welcome to stay novice as long as you would like. Yeah, that's where I need to be. Yeah. So yeah, novice. And again, you're welcome to stay there until you've accumulated those credits that help you graduate up to the next level. Okay. I'm really sorry. We have some guests here tonight. At the end of the year, we have an end of year competition that is, I call it like the final round from all of our evaluations. We've held 5 evaluations this year where each member is invited to submit 2 images, up to 2, 1 or 2 images at each evaluation for a total of 10. And then on October the 12th, those images that you've had evaluated by our various professional photographers, you'll enter into an end of year competition. And then at our banquet in December, we give out these lovely awards on pieces of paper, and bragging rights that you got first, second, or third place or an honorable mention in the various categories we've talked about: portraits, landscapes, et cetera, et cetera.
At the end of the year competition revelation, you can see hundreds, probably 450 or so pictures of people of things that have been submitted for evaluations and the awards that go with them. So they don't just present the awards, they present lots of images, and there are a lot of awards too. So you can be inspired and get some interest in your own mind of what is winning and what changes you needed to make yours a winner next time. Okay, Philip, you want to comment on print?
All right, well, we hope to I have a lot of prints tonight already. I hope you are considering submitting them. The most important thing is you must have them in with the deadline digitally by whatever it is, midnight, October 12th. If you didn't bring your print tonight, that's fine. You can make arrangements. My phone number and the email are in the newsletter. If you ever read that, that'd be good if you did. As all the rules are in there too, the links to the rules. So, but here's the thing: a couple of things. They should be mounted. They don't have to have a mat around them, but they need to be able to stand in the light box. And if you've been in any of our monthly evaluations, you'll see I have to stand them up there, and I don't want to hold them up there while the judges are looking at them, because there's 3 judges and some of them like to look really closely at them, and I need to get out of the way. So just putting it on a piece of paper, if I put it up there, it's going to fall out. So mount it somehow.
Can be framed, can be mounted, but cannot be on a flimsy piece of paper because that won't stand.
Yeah, actually, we'll allow the frames, but in the rules, it actually says no. And at least in the old rules. In the old rules, it said no frames, but the ones I see, I've got some that are in frames, so we're going to take those and we're going to run with them. That's the way they are. But don't put your name on the front of it, please, because the judges are looking at them and they may know, oh my gosh, I know Karen's a really good photographer and this is her work and I'm going to give that a better grade. It's totally anonymous. So again, that's the key things. If you haven't brought them tonight, make arrangements to bring them to me, but make sure you get your digital submission in by Saturday night. Well, unfortunately, I've already got something handed to me with frames. Technically, our rules are no.
Okay.
You can do metal prints, you can do acrylic. There's the size limitations. The size limitations are in the rules, if you read them. I've already got a couple, so I'm not going to take them out of the frames that I've got. But technically, not supposed to be framed, and it actually distracts. If it's in a frame with glass in front of it, there's going to be glare. So the judges may not see the image as well. So that's another reason not to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Did I see Fred? Fred is not here. Fred's asked me to include this. The VPPA has a special session at the Herzog Studio on the 29th. And so any of you who are interested in that, this should be a nice event, and find your way there. And he didn't put how to respond, but I think it's through the VPPA. Tom is here tonight. Tom Hennessy is well-known. I don't know if the category is formally that you are the Ginter formal designated driver of floral photography there, but without a category or with, he's still that person. He studied photography at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. His work history is that his first DSLR is only in 2011. He's a Canon shooter. He's an artist at residence at Crossroads. He's a Lightroom user. Not a big Photoshop guy, but there's certain things that he does do in Photoshop. And we're honored to have him this evening talk about floral photography.
Thank you. Good evening. I do a lot of work with Louis Ginter. I'm a volunteer there. I started volunteering back in 2016 when I retired from my full-time job. My wife has volunteered in their garden shop for over 20 years. And so when I first went in to talk to them about volunteering, I was kind of interested in doing photography, but they didn't really have that as a volunteer category. And I didn't want to go there and pull weeds. So I started volunteering, working with the butterflies, letting people in and out of the butterfly enclosure, working with the Garden Fest. Every year I'd take a couple of nights and stand in front of the big tree, taking pictures of people with their own phones. That was a lot of fun. But I was also taking a lot of photos at the gardens and posting them on Facebook. And I got contacted by their PR department, and they said, we really like your photography, but we can't use them because you're watermarking them. So, okay, I'll quit watermarking. So then I was doing that, and I tend to take a lot of photos. And so eventually, getting them to them was a little bit of a challenge. So finally, I just got a Dropbox file. And every time I take photos, I load them into a file for that day in Dropbox, and they have access to it. And so I have probably going back to 2016, 2017, I have a lot of photographs in Dropbox that I've been doing. So I really like flower photography as well as a lot of other things. There's no way to get this full image, full screen on here, is there? Yeah. Okay. Play from current slide. Okay, there we go. Yeah, okay, that's better. That's what I wanted. Okay. I saw this quote by Georgia O'Keeffe, who is one of my favorite artists. When you take a flower in your hand and really look at it, it's your world for the moment. And I want to give that to someone. And this is just a photograph of a coneflower getting ready to bud, get ready to open. And to me, the extremely fine details in that are just amazing. And if you don't really stop and look at them, you don't see that. So I really like to take the time to get in and really look at the fine details in a flower like this. So what I focus on when I'm out in the gardens, and when I have a workshop coming up on Saturday out there on flower photography, the three main things to me are the subject, the lighting, and the background. They can make or break the photograph. Okay? So the flower is going to be the subject, but lighting is important. When I take a look at this flower that I photographed out there, is a type of anemone. Problem with it is it was on a sunny day. So I have a fairly harsh shadow with it. So when that happens, and if you go out there this week, it looks like we're going to have full sun every day. That's when I whip out my shade, my diffuser. And that makes a huge difference between having a harsh shadow and also makes the background more contrasty and softening it with the diffuser. So I use this all the time when I'm out in the garden. Ideally, I want a bright overcast day. That'll give me very soft, bright lighting and make it much easier. It also applies to landscapes. I was out there middle of April is always a good time because the tulips are in full bloom. And I was out there a couple of years ago, and as a volunteer, I go in early. I often get in there at 7:30 in the morning before the huddled masses come in. And this was pretty early in the morning. And the problem with this is that the sun was right over my right shoulder and pretty bright. It was perfect though, because I had the fountains spraying up, which they don't always do. I did a 2-second exposure in order to get the fountains that way. The problem was it was too contrasty of an image. So I came back about 2 hours later as a cloud went in front of the sun. And the difference that it made was really significant. If I knew somebody who flew the Goodyear blimp, I would have had to come in but I don't know that person. But the difference in just waiting a little bit until I get the right lighting, having that cloud go in front of the sun made a huge difference in the photo. This has been one of my favorite photos of the fountains in front of the gardens. The other thing that's a big factor for getting the background is controlling the depth of field. I took these 2 shots, and this is the little flower called a Siberian squill. It's only a couple of inches tall. It's a very small one. It blooms early in February. And to take this one, I was laying down on the ground. I tend to lay down a lot, kneel a lot, sit a lot. So if you see me at the gardens, I'm going to be wearing a knee pad on my left knee because I always kneel on my left knee to get down there for the photographs. And a lot of the places that I have to kneel are concrete or blacktop or gravel. So, but for this one, I was actually laying on the ground, and I did a whole series of f-stops, but at f4, I have a pretty nice looking background, nice and soft background. If I go up to f8, I get more detail in the flower, but the background starts to get busy, and I don't like that. So I go with the more wide open exposure in order to get that softer background. I don't always have the option of moving what I'm photographing in order to get something different in the background, so I try to control it that way. So when I'm going to have a shallow background, I try to work with that. This is an African lily or agapanthus, and I wanted to make sure I got this part here in focus. And I was fine with the rest of it going soft focus in the background. So I wanted to get this, and it also made sure that the background there, it was out of focus enough. It wasn't going to interfere. I wasn't going to have any problems with the background. So I was very happy with this one, knowing that I was going to work with a shallow focus. There's another one that's a dandelion or a daffodil. And again, because the daffodil is actually coming up and curving and bringing the flower forward, I was able to focus on the flower at like f6.3 and still have the background go soft. So I like the way that worked for me. So I typically, when I'm out in the gardens shooting, I'm typically shooting f4, f5.6, f6.3. That normally gives me enough detail in my subject, but also allows the background to go soft. Here's one I didn't have to worry about because I had the lake reflecting the sun, or reflecting the sky in it. So I had this very soft blue background in it. I could shoot with more depth of field for this because I wasn't concerned about the background getting in the way. Roses are great out in the gardens. And again, I tried to make sure that I got the focus centered here at the important part and then let the rest of it go soft focus. Water droplets are great, and rose petals tend to bead up really well in the rain. So I really like to look at rose petals, or not the petals, but the leaves of the rose plants. They work very, very well. So getting the water droplets is really cool. There used to be a tree out there. I don't know why they cut it down, but it was between the roses and the lake. And it was a pussy willow tree. And in February, it would get the little catkins on it. And I went out there one morning on a rainy morning. It was still raining. In fact, you can see there's a couple of raindrops that I caught in the picture. But getting the water droplets the way they beat it up on here was really cool. I really like this photo, and I wish that tree was still there because I'd still be going there and photographing it every year. And this one is a daylily. And I really wanted to focus on getting reproductive parts there and not worrying about the rest of the background. Letting it go against a nice bright yellow background, I thought worked out very well. So I was very happy with that, and that's what I was focusing on. And here's another one I had to lay down on the ground for. This is helleborus, and they have a lot of those out there blooming early in the year. And getting those, a nice bright helleborus, and by filling the frame, I didn't have to really worry about the background. So if I've got a background that's a problem, I just get closer and try to fill the frame so the background isn't going to be a factor. So that's what I try to accomplish.
Title that.
Huh?
How do you title your photos?
I hate titling. That would be helleborus number 2, or I don't know. I often have I always struggle with that because, I take a lot of pictures of camellias, for example. I mean, how many different names are there to call a camellia? So I struggle with that.
Well, that's buddies.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes instead of photographing outdoors, I want to photograph indoors. And the reason I do that is control. I call it tabletop photography because I don't have a studio, but I do have a table. But what it does is it gives me control of the subject, the lighting, and the background. This is one I took back about 10 years ago. For my birthday, my daughters bought me some flowers, and this was a calla lily that they bought. And this one was really nice. I really liked the way it came out. I still try to photograph calla lilies on a regular basis, but this one was one that I really liked. I photographed it on a white background, and I just wanted to capture the flow of the blossom here. I really liked the way it came out. This was a very dark calla lily that I bought, a really dark red. It was almost to a black, but the edge of it showed up, and so I wanted to get it dark, but have enough light to bring out that front edge on it. So I did that one with a black background, but really trying to bring out and highlight the edge. There's another one that's a red and orange calla lily. I tried to get the light above it, shining down into it, because I wanted to get these ribs and veins showing up on there. I thought that really helped add to the image. And I wanted to capture the curve. And calla lilies are good to work with. They don't wilt quickly. You can work with them for a few days and have fun. I mean, I brought some flowers in from outdoors, and while I'm setting up, they're starting to wilt. These are good for that. Sure. I use a 100mm macro lens almost exclusively. 100mm macro lens. I use that almost exclusively. This is another one. This is when you go to the grocery store and you see that glass vase full of tulips that will bloom as the year goes on. I got those and I took one out, and as it bloomed, it opened up into a nice bowl. So I got my light above and behind it so that it was shining down and filling up the bowl. I wanted to get that light to really fill it up. And so that's what I liked about that one. And I wanted to get all of the detail by having the light from the inside. I got more detail in it than if I had the light outside. And this is one that's from my garden. This is a peony, and this was one that came out really nicely this year. And it held up while I was trying to photograph it for a while. I've had them in the past that wanted to start wilting, but this one held up very nicely. And I put the light above and behind it a bit in order to try to get it to flow across the flower and bring out all of the texture in the petals. I didn't want to have just a white blob. I wanted to really get as much texture out of it as I could. For these, I do both. And I'll talk, this was flash. I have a strobe for that I shoot. I like to shoot through a translucent umbrella, so I get soft, even lighting, a large area of it. This, I picked up these dahlias a little while ago at Trader Joe's. And out of I think there were 5 blossoms, only one was really good. And I photographed this a number of times, and I did this one on a white background. But dahlias, I think, are great flowers to photograph. So I try to grow some myself, and but I buy them whenever I get a chance to find a good one. This is another calla lily, which I thought looked good in black and white. I've done it in both black and white and color, but I thought this looked nice. The lighting was soft, but it showed the flow and the curves very nicely. And this is a sunflower, but again, done in black and white, wanting to see the detail of the whole flower. And this, I just took a couple of weeks ago. This was a coneflower. I bought these in order to plant them, and this one looked really cool, so I brought one of them in order to photograph. So I got that photo that way. And this is back in the beginning of the year. I had an amaryllis. I had bought one. It was supposed to be pink. It turned out to be dark red, which is okay. And I thought the dark red on the black background, but with the stamens and pistils showing up so vividly, I thought made a good image. So I liked it that way. And then, okay. Yeah. Okay, now, one problem with doing this is that flowers tend to have bugs on them. They tend to be dirty. There tend to be challenges. These grow in my backyard, these lilies of the valley. They're very nice little flowers. They grow in my backyard, and every year I try to get a nice photograph of them. The bees bloom during peak pollen season. When you're outside and you've got that yellow film on your car, that's when these are blooming. So what I normally do is I'll pick a couple when they're just starting to bud, and I'll pot them and bring them in and let them finish blooming indoors. But even at that, and then I'll rinse them, I'll wipe them down with a damp sponge, I'll do all sorts of stuff. Even at that, this is a screenshot of my spot removal on that image. So I spent more time than I would really prefer to taking the little bits of pollen off. So that took some time. Okay. Some useful equipment. Of course, I always use a tripod for these shots because sometimes the exposures are long. It gives me more control. I use one or more lights. Most of the time anymore, I use one light. And I've bought the umbrellas. I have soft boxes. I've got ring lights. I've got a strobe. I bought different lights over the years, trying for different things. So I have a lot to play with. I use my macro lens. Like I said, my 100mm macro lens is my go-to lens. Sometimes I will use extension tubes when I have to get really close. And then I need tools to position the subject. This little vise comes in really handy for holding a flower. And sometimes when I'm holding a flower that's got a fairly weak stem, I'll put the stem into a straw and hold that up so that I can get it. But this allows me to move it around and position it. These allow me to hold sometimes a piece of foam board to be a reflector. I can sometimes, if I'm trying to hang something that I want to be hanging when I photograph it, I can use these. I've got some different tools that I can use to hold either reflectors or even the subject itself. This one comes in very handy to raise and lower. I will often have my little vise sitting on here, and I raise it and lower it, trying to get it to the right level in order to get the angle I'm trying to get. I also, though I don't have a picture of it here, I have a computer table that's designed for you're sitting at a chair. You can raise or lower the table to get your laptop at the right level. So I use that as well. So between raising and lowering the table, raising and lowering the subject this way, I've tried different ways to try to get the subject into the best position. Yes? 6 by 6, 6 by 6 on top. 6 by 6 inches, yeah. Okay. This is one I use a lot now. I use a 18-inch LED ring light. It's very flexible. It's dimmable. You can adjust the color temperature. That comes in very handy. And it's also good if you're setting up to do a Zoom and you want yourself, to present well on a Zoom. These come in very handy. So it does a nice job. So I use this a lot for a lot of the photography I do. I also use this flashpoint monolight. It's a 600-watt light. It gives me a lot of power. When I'm using this, I'm shooting it through a large translucent umbrella. So I get basically a wall of soft light. Comes in very handy. Okay. I have a stand that I use. Typically, I have a piece of black cloth hanging on it, which is helpful for the backgrounds. I have bought other backgrounds as well, which I can use. They also come in handy if I want to photograph my grandson. And here's a shot where I was setting up to take a photograph of an iris from my garden using a light above it. I was holding a piece of paper in order to give me some fill, and I had white foam board in the background in order to give it a white background. So I had it set up like that in order to get an image like this. Bob? That was those compact fluorescent bulbs, daylight balanced. Yes, he wanted to know the light in this picture, what was I using? And at that point, I was using compact fluorescent daylight balance bulbs in that. Yes, so shooting through the umbrella. In order to get an image like this, with the background being nice and white. But playing around with backgrounds and having to change backgrounds out can be a pain. So I decided to make my own backgrounds. Here's some ranunculus that I picked up this summer. I guess the background that I made. I kind of like that one. This is teasel. Now this grows alongside the highway, so I had to stop along 295 and run into the center there and pick someone one day. But I like them. I think they're pretty cool flowers, and that's another background that I made. Here's one that I like. These are dahlias that I bought to plant, and that's another background that I made. So the way I do it is I have a whole bunch of backgrounds in a file on Lightroom, and I connect my laptop up to my flat screen TV, and I take the pictures with the background there. And I can change backgrounds in about 10 seconds. And so I can take a background this way, and this way, and this way, and this way, and this one. No, and I'm shooting. Okay, now I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but these subjects right here, these zinnias were all focus stacked. So I was shooting at an f6.3. So I have a very soft focus there. You're not picking up the pixels on the TV screen. It's very soft. And the photographs that I'm using for this are typically purposely out of focus taken photos of foliage or the woods or flower gardens in order to have a background that looks fairly natural. I mean, I can do a black background and a white background this way as well, and then change to other colors and other patterns to try to, get what I want. So that comes in very handy. Now, talk about focus bracketing and stacking. This has come in really handy for me for what I'm trying to do. Use two different ways to do it. One is you can change the focus of the lens while taking multiple photos, or you can move the camera between shots while taking multiple photos. It can be done manually, but I'm not anal enough for that. But it can be done electronically. So I combine them in Helicon Focus software, which is excellent. It's designed for focus stacking. It does a really good job. Now, why I do it. This is a Christmas cactus, and that's a very close-up image of the business end of the Christmas cactus, which I thought was really pretty cool. That was taken with my 100 millimeter macro lens with extension tubes at f/25. And that's the amount of depth that I could get at that. This was taken at f/8, 20 photos stacked together in order to combine to have a much cleaner image. Much better demonstration of what the business end of this really looks like. I can't get that shot with a single shot any other way. It's too small, the depth of field is too shallow, just can't get there. But the focus stacking does it really nicely. Okay, now, this here, if you can see it, this is called a Cognesis stack shot system. And it's a motorized focusing rail with a little computer attached to it that connects to the camera. And the way I use this is I always start off going all the way in and focus on the back of the flower that I'm photographing. And then I move back while looking through the viewfinder until the front is in focus. And when I do that, I stop. It says, okay, you have just traveled 65 millimeters. This will travel 100 millimeters. And they have one that'll travel 200 millimeters. But 100 millimeters works for me. Once I do that, I then say, okay, how many photos do I want to take? Okay, so depending on how much detail there is in the subject, here, 25 photos to cover 65 millimeters. I hit start. It moves back to the starting position and then takes the picture and moves, takes a picture and moves. That will take me about 2 minutes to work through those pictures. And every time it takes the picture, the flash goes off and it takes the shot. Then it moves back, the flash goes off and it takes the shot. And when I'm done, I end up being able to put together a photograph that I couldn't take otherwise. I love dandelions. I think they're great. Pat? No, that's separate. That's that separate strobe that I bought. So the flash connects to the camera, but this connects to the camera to make the camera flash, but then the camera tells the flash to go off. So they communicate that way. So, but taking a dandelion and getting the level of detail that I can get and the depth is something I can't do otherwise. So I think it's really cool. Well, it can take the pictures electronically. Yeah, and I'll talk about that also in a little bit because I have a camera that will do that now. Okay. So, and this is an iris from my garden. Wanted to get up close to it. I need to edit it because you see this little thing here? Sometimes you get these little artifacts. Each one looks like a little dot that was left from each image. So I'd go in there and I'd do a little bit of spot removal to take it out. So sometimes you get that kind of an artifact. Okay. This is one that I really like. This is ornamental onions. And this is about 1 inch across as it's opening up. And they're really cool. I mean, once it opens up, you have a ball of flowers, but as these are opening up, I think they look really cool to capture them for the image.
How do you know how many to take per millimeter?
Um, Trial and error, I practiced. If something like this, which has a lot of detail, and that's a small flower, that's a small mum that was maybe 1.5 inches diameter. I wanted to get in close and get just that real fine detail. I will figure out how far I moved and take at least one image every millimeter. But if I've moved, 20 millimeters on this and take 25 shots, that's worth it to me to get the results. I think if you take too few, you want to have overlap between the shots because the software takes the in-focus portions of each photo and combines them. Some form of magic, I don't know. Okay. This is a ranunculus that I took that I picked up earlier this year. Again, I got up close to it just to get the folds of the petals. And here's a dark red one. And I like being able to get in and get all of the detail and the depth that way. This is a carnation that I picked up last week at the store. I picked up a mixed bouquet of flowers and there was a carnation in, and I thought, let's see, I'll just get up close and just take that, which I thought was pretty cool. This was in the same bouquet that I picked up. This is a dark purple chrysanthemum, which was probably, I don't know, 2.5, 3 inches in diameter. And I took a number of photographs of it. It does look pretty cool in color, but I thought this made a really interesting black and white study, interesting study in form. So I did that this last week. I thought it was a pretty good one. Okay. Now with my new camera that I got back at Christmas, I got a Canon R5. The Canon R5 has focus bracketing built in. Why my Canon 5D Mark IV didn't have that built in, I don't know. I think it should have, but it didn't. But the mirrorless camera has it. So I go to the menu, I enable focus bracketing, I say how many shots do I want to take, and then it has a focus increment, which is what relative amount will it move between shots. And that's basically changing the focus itself. That's the biggest challenge with this is I don't know how far it's going to move between shots. So there's some trial and error involved in this. The starting point is a 4 out of 10. And so I normally shoot somewhere 4 to 5 on there and see how it works. So then when I do it, and here's a shot. This is not stacked. This is the first shot in a sequence. This is the shot I would normally take when I go to the garden. f6.3, I'm on a tripod, a 25th of a second, but that's a nice shot of an aloe flower. But if I stack them, 20 photos, I get more detail and I still have a nice background on it. I don't, the background doesn't start to get real crunchy. So
with a slow shutter speed like that, that's obviously stable enough. You don't deal with camera shake in between the
I'm
movement.
on a tripod. It's at that. And now when I do this, it's on a tripod and it might take 2 minutes to take those shots. Using my R5, it takes 2 seconds. So it's a and you're there, which makes it very nice. Okay. I do use a tripod though. This was out in Shenandoah, using the camera and a tripod, shooting to get a fern.
What about the effect of wind?
Wind,
They're on that effect.
well, wind is a problem. You have to be very careful about wind. I have found that the software I use is fairly forgiving about some movement. But yeah, windy days, that's not good. But a day like this, I was in Shenandoah, it was calm, and I was able to get some nice shots. This one was, these are spring beauties, which are very small little wildflowers that bloom early in the year. I got these in Powhatan State Park. I have a friend who has shown me some areas out there that are good for wildflowers in the spring. So that's those. This is called saxifrage. And I don't know who names this stuff. I mean, I looked them up after I take pictures of them to find out what they are. And it's like, saxifrage. Well, that makes total sense.
Are to everybody. But you are using your external software because it's built into the camera, it will do it.
Built into the camera will take the pictures. The external software combines them. I don't know. I didn't know that this. I mean,
I think it will give you a JPEG. Wait.
yeah, I know it will do that for. I know it'll do that for HDR, but I still prefer to do HDR in Lightroom rather than in the camera. So, and here's another one that I took out in the Botanic Gardens, just trying to get that detail is what's important to me. This is cool. This is a type of pea plant. And that's a really neat little flower, small flower on a pea plant. Okay? And this is one that I took out there earlier this year. Coneflower, it had rained that night. So the petals are wet. They don't beat up, but they're wet. But that was 20 shots and the background is still really nice and soft. But if I take a look at it up close and personal, if I zoom in on it, look at that.
This is natural light.
Natural light. Yeah. Just out in the gardens, probably a 30th of a second or a 60th of a second. And I got 20 shots, and that's the image I got. But if I zoom in, that in itself is pretty cool. Yeah. So yeah, I've been happy doing this. Okay. So I want to do a quick demonstration of the Helicon software on some pictures that I had taken. So I took some photos, and if you look down along the bottom, I took the full flower and then I zoomed in close. Okay. So I'm going to go down below here and I'm going to take 30 shots that I set up to do. Okay, so I'm going to export the Helicon Focus, which is an add-in that goes into Lightroom. And it's going to give them a name. Just call it Zinnia. And then I export it as the original. These are DNG files. So it will export them as a DNG file and then return them back into Lightroom as a DNG file. So now it's bringing them in. Think so? Okay. Is it there? Okay. It's showing the first image in the stack out of 30 images. And there are 3 different methods to render it. I usually use B or C. And in this one, I don't think it makes a much difference which I use. Okay. So I'm going to hit render. So as it renders, what's happening is it's going to go through each image and select the parts that are in focus. From what I've heard, I haven't tried Photoshop, but from what I've heard, I mean, this is designed specifically for this, and it does a really nice job. Yes, yes. They're not shipping stuff. They are maintaining the software. I did buy a Helicon FD tube, which goes between the camera and the lens. and would then control the lens. And I've used that in the past, and it worked okay. The R5 just does it better. Okay.
While you're waiting, so when you're using that 100 millimeter macro,
Yeah.
when you use extension tubes, are you putting them on that?
Yes.
Is the question?
Yes. Using the 100 millimeter macro, am I using extension tubes? And sometimes I am. They go between the camera body and the lens, and they allow me to focus much closer. Now, that's one reason. Okay, this is now rendered. It's done. And so I can come up here. To save the image. Okay. Okay. This lets me save it. Okay. So what it's done is it takes it and it puts the image back into Lightroom. Although I'm not seeing it in Lightroom. It usually puts it in as the second image in the collection, but it's not doing that right now. I don't know what happened. Yeah, well, I name it when I save it. So it names it. But anyway, what it does is it brings it back as a very well-focused stacked image, and very, very well. So,
Can you reopen that file and do adjustments, or you just have to start the process?
no, you can reopen that file and do adjustments, but what I have done is I have sometimes taken that same stack and rendered it with a different thing. And sometimes you can do it like, do it method B and then method C, and then stack those two together to try things. But mostly, if I get the settings right, it does a great job. And then I do any editing in Lightroom. How big of a file do you get? So shooting with a 30 megapixel sensor, I end up with a stack that's maybe 150 megabytes. So it's a big file. Yeah. And the other thing that I've done with it, I have used this for landscapes. Basically what I do is in manual on my camera, I'll just set the focal plane at maybe 3 different places, close, mid-range, and deep, and then combine those 3 images and Helicon, and it does a great job. So, that in its, I know that the camera, I could do the stacking, of a landscape with that, but I feel that I don't really need to try to do that. But for macro work, it does a great job. I'm very happy with it. Any questions?
Do you find that the base level of the software, which is incredibly inexpensive actually, is all you need for this, or do you need to buy one of the other 2 packages?
I went with the Pro package. When you get the 30-day trial, it's a trial of the Pro package. And I just knew that I was going to be doing a lot of it, so I upgraded to Pro. And I bought the lifetime package. Helicon Soft or Helicon Focus, and it does a great job. They also have a package where you can connect your camera to your computer and run it off of their software through a cable, basically tethering it. But I find that I just take the pictures and then bring them into the computer and do it. Works out very nicely. Anything else?
Round soft thing in the garden,
I do it all the time.
the clips too?
What? I haven't used the clips,
Okay.
but I use the diffuser all the time and the tripod. The main thing is they don't want you going into the beds. I know that many of us who've gone to the gardens have been reprimanded for that. I have as well, but yeah, try to stay out of the beds. But yeah, I use that, and I do photography workshops. I'm doing one Saturday, and I have several of these diffusers available, and I tell people about them, and nobody takes one. See? But that nobody in the workshop goes out and uses it. I'm like, come on, you guys, this is helpful.
Is your class full for Saturday?
I don't believe it is. So, yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, one of my favorites, I mean, as much as I love the flower photography, last year when they had that Encanto exhibit of the sculptures, that was phenomenal, especially at night. That was really a cool thing to do. Okay, any questions? Like I say, this Saturday, I have a workshop of floral photography. We go out in the gardens, shoot, come back, edit, and share, which is fun. In the spring, what I hope to do, which I've done before, is done the floral portraits workshop where I bring in flowers and lights and backgrounds, and we take pictures with that way. That's a lot of fun. So, yes. Oh, thank you. Anybody else?
Do you have to have that particular lens to really make something at your workshop? That
No.
would be
No. My 100mm macro is my favorite lens because it's very good at that. My second one for flower photography is my 100 to 400mm telephoto because it does a nice job of close focusing, and it's also good for things that are a little bit further away. So that's good. Or even just, if you have a 24 to 105, main thing you're going to be looking at is trying to keep your depth of field because the wider the angle of the lens, the more difficult it is to control the background. What kind of camera do you use? Okay. Do you ever use extension tubes?
I have on my Canon.
Okay. I have extension tubes that might work on your Nikon.
Or Nikon you do?
Yeah. Whether they fit that mount or not, I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah.
Tom, did you remind people how to sign up for your upcoming classes? Where to go?
Just go to lewisginter.org, go to the tab for Learn, and it'll list all of the workshops coming up. It's listed under Nature Photography. Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Enjoyed it.
So I just wanted to do a clarification. Karen and I went and looked at the end of your rules. And, we have all the photos and then creative art. Creative art is intended when you start mucking with a photo. Like if you put an insect on there or put drops on there or put elves on the flowers, that's the creative art aspect of it. However, the rules never have said, and don't say now, that if you take multiple pictures and stitch them together to make one photo, that's not allowed. That's a panorama, and that has been allowed. The same would go for if you stack a bunch of photos and create a digital negative, and then you got your digital negative, that's a photo. Now, if you start screwing around with that creatively, then that goes in creative art. Otherwise, you should be able to put your panorama in landscape or whatever it's appropriate for, or your stacked photo in floral. That's at least, we haven't discussed the stacking, but I mean, the same principle seems like it would apply. You take multiple shots, stitch them together, which is exactly what stacking is doing, or making a panorama. Right, exactly. That's what I said. If you go into Photoshop and start combining things, putting eagles in your shots or suns that weren't there, or so you have two moons or two suns, and may be cool, but that's creative art, and some of it's really cool. What?
What if I was on Tatooine and I shot and there were two suns?
That's good.
Just bring your passport and show us the stamp.
Yes, you have to bring proof that you were there.
What falls into the don't do it category?
Sasquatch?
Shy swamp.
Oh, I thought Sasquatch too. Sasquatch, if you get a good shot of Sasquatch, that's fine. Sky swapping is right. That's not, that's creative change.
Thank you, Tom, for coming. There is one other program that, VenCat, what's the name of that other program we were talking about that does focus stacking? Zareen, right. So that there is more than one program to do this, but, Helicon is, I think, one of the first, and maybe one of the best, but, you can do that with other things. Any other business to conduct? Yes.
So let me walk back, this Philip, print director, let me walk back what I said earlier, because we looked it up with some other board members while the presentation was going on. It very specifically says no frame prints. So we are not accepting frame prints. I've spoken to those that have submitted them, and they're going to do something different with them. So if you bring them to me, and again, remember the size limitation of um, 16 by 30. So thank you. But look up the rules. Okay. So, but it very specifically says everywhere we looked, no frame prints. So don't do that. And the judges won't like the way they look anyway, because the glass will be there and the reflections and all that stuff. So anyway, just want to clarify that. So we're clear from here on out. Thank you.
Any other business for the group?
One other
One other question?
question.
Yes.
Yeah, just the upcoming exhibit at the VCU Medical Center. Will they allow frame prints with glass or no glass? You can have a frame print with glass.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Those rules that we were talking about are pertinent to the end of the year.
But some exhibits.
Right.